There are various reasons as to why you might have clicked on this video, but the biggest reason is that you just want to improve your DFS game, probably specifically in PGA DFS. My name is Eric Paulson and I run 95sports.com. For the past 3 years, I've been giving PGA DFS advice. With that, in 2018, we were able to hit a winner in 19 straight events. Now, that was more the emphasis in 2018. In 2019, I wanted to put more of an emphasis on making profitable lineups. With that, we were able to cash an 85% of cash contest. In 2020, went with more of a hybrid approach to help out, everyone in the DFS community. With that, I've been able to establish what is going to be the best route for you, the PGA DFS player, to improve, to be able to make more profit week to week, month to month, year to year in your PGA DFS contest. So let's get into that right now. So the first thing that I want to point out is that the average DFS player spends $51 per month. That's not much. If we look at what the average American spends on their hobbies per month, it's around $75 per month. So the average DFS player is a little bit less than that in terms of hobby. And I bring that distinction out because I feel like a majority of the players in the DFS community play this as more of a hobby, play this as more of a way to enjoy the sports that they enjoy watching. It's just another extension, another avenue to enjoy the game that you already enjoy watching a little bit more. All right, so how do you go from being a hobby type player to a profitable player? Well, we can break that down into two criteria. We got the cash player, which is going to be much easier to track, much easier to predict. That's going to be the route that most of you guys should go. Now, there is probably a select few of you watching this that have a certain budget that allows you to allocate resources to being able to max enter 150 lineups into a contest. Now, those players know that they're doing high risk, high reward type stuff. They're going to lose a lot, but when they win, they're going to hit big. Now, you can be profitable in both approaches, and I'll touch on that here. We'll also touch on contest entry here in a second as to what you guys should be expecting as well. We'll start with the cash approach here first. All right, so in terms of being a better PGA DFS player, you do want to be focusing on and entering better contests and making better lineups. The first thing that you can do to make a better lineup is trying to make a lineup that gives you the best chance to get 6 for 6 across the cut line in full tournament field events. I do want to make that clear distinction with full tournament field events. Those are going to be the most optimal tournaments that you can enter, or at the very least, tournaments that have a cut. We have about 38 tournaments that will have a cut this year out of 51 total events. So that is a good portion of events that we're going to be able to enter in which you're going to be able to gain an edge. Now, tournaments that don't have a cut typically have a reduced edge because everyone is going to be on pretty much the same players. The amount of elite plays are significantly reduced, where in a full tournament field event, there's going to be a lot more players for people to choose from. More mistakes are going to be made by the average DFS player. So if you are following these rules and entering in full tournament field events, you're going to be successful. So let's go over what you can do to make a lineup that's going to give you the best chance to get 6 for 6 across the cut line. Well, I like to use my 3 rules of 30 as just kind of a guide. So 3 rules of 30, you want to be looking at recent form, stat fit, and course history. We'll start with course history. What goes into course history? Well, you want to be looking at the last 4 years and see how a player has done at that tournament. I typically want to look for no missed cuts and at least a top 30 finish. There's the first rule of 30. For stat fit, well, by looking at course history, we're going to be able to tell what are the key stats for that week. We can typically pull in 3 to 5 key stats. Typically I like to look at 3 key stats and then 2 secondary stats. You can pull in that data, and thus we're able to determine which players are going to be the top 30 stat fits. Our second rule of 30. Then recent form is kind of easy. I like to look at least 3 straight make cuts in a row with at least a top 30 finish. There's our third 3 rule of 30. By pulling in those 3 tiers, we're able to determine which players we should be on. And also with that, we're able to determine which players are going to be great upside plays, but also players that are not going to have as much risk as well. By factoring that all in together, we're able to make a very good player pool that's based on the most optimal approach that we want to go with for this specific week. So you have your player pool down and you're trying to, concentrate in on one main build. You want to make one main build, okay? Because that's going to have all your concentrated thoughts in for the whole week, and you're able to make the best build possible come Wednesday, okay? And that's one thing I want to point out. Typically, you want to reserve your contests on Monday morning and then finalize your lineup on Wednesday. Throughout the week, you'll be able to determine really the top 4 players that you want to be on. And then Wednesday, it's filling in the 5th and 6th player into your build. Now, you already have your player pool set, and you just want to make your best lineup possible based on that player pool that you have. A simple thing that you guys can do is rank them, 1 through, let's say, 30 players in your player pool, and you can make her lineup based off of the ranks. And it's a simple math equation. So you got 6 players that you have to fit in there. You just add up their ranks, okay, into that specific build. And whichever lineup has the lowest rank there is going to be your best lineup, specifically speaking. So if you're able to fit the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd player into your lineup, and then maybe the 20th and 15th and 16th ranked player into your roster construction, and that's the lowest total, well, that's going to be your most optimal lineup. Personally, for me, what I like to do actually is break it down into this. I have my core plays and my high exposure plays. I want to jam in those core plays if possible. If not, if I can't fit in all of those, I'll go to the high exposure plays. I want to fit in as much possible of those players into that main build as possible. And if I can't fit those, then I'll dip into the mid tier if I have to, or the mid exposure plays if I have to. And that's how I make my specific main build. But let's say you have your main build. You want to enter that main build into cash contest, the $25 single entry contest, the $10 single entry contest, and the $5 single entry contest. And I'm saying single entry contest because we want to specifically be looking at the double up contest there. Those are going to be the best contests for you to enter. And I'll be breaking this down further, but in simple, that is where the biggest portion you're going to get in terms of percent cashing. It's around 43% of the people that enter into that contest are going to cash. That's going to be huge for you. Now, let's say if you just have that itch to enter into GPPs, that's fine. I get it. There's the fun factor into that. Typically what you'd want to do is never let the amount that you're playing in GPPs outweigh the amount that you're playing in cash. Let's say you're playing, $40 in cash. Well, maybe you'd only want to enter $10 into GPPs. And it should still be your main build. If you typically always want to enter your main build into a GPP because that's always going to be your best lineup because it's based on getting 6 or 6 across the cut line. If you want to factor in a little bit more variance, you want to enter in still that main build into, let's say, 10 GPPs, 10 $1 GPPs, if you will. And I'll get into why into a second. I'll get into that contest in a second here. But then you go through and edit that lineup out one at a time, 9 times, so that you have 10 unique builds, but still based on your most optimal build, still based on the best chance to get 6 for 6 across the cut line. And I want to point that out as well, because that is what the main high dollar GPP players typically do in their contests. 41% of the people that are playing high dollar contests will have a lineup submitted that has a total ownership of over 90% or more. Now, why am I calling out total ownership? Well, because if a guy is high owned, that typically means they're a good play. People seem to think that they have to make a lineup that doesn't have high ownership. That's just not true. What you'd want to do is at the end of your lineup, maybe throw in someone that is lower owned. But if you're making a lineup based on high ownership players, they're good players, okay? For the most part, they're gonna finish well. There's a reason why they're that high owned. Where you'd want to make your differences are at the end of your builds, and that's specifically what you would want to do. And going back to that distinction, where the higher dollar amount of players play a lineup with over 90% total ownership, it's 41%. In a low dollar contest, it's around 8%. That's a clear distinction there. That is huge. And that brings up a common mistake that I think people are playing, is that they're not making lineup decisions based on the optimal approach there. Just want to cap off that cash/main lineup approach that I mentioned in terms of how it can be profitable before we get into the max entry player and then also the contest breakdown, because those are going to be 2 very good talking points as well. But just going over this, let's say you're that average DFS player that has a $50 budget, if you will. That average DFS player that plays $51 per month. Well, with this specifically playing cash, I think you could probably get away with doing that $50 a week. So I kind of made a projected outcome here. So we have 38 events in which we'll have a cut event. So let's say we play in all those, and let's say we cash in about 70% of those, which based on the numbers through 9 to 5 throughout the past 3 years, that's pretty likely. It's been between 65 and 85% in those optimal events that I've been talking about. So let's say you just cash in 70% of those. You could make a profit of $550 at the end of the year had you started at the beginning of the year. That's pretty good for someone that's just trying to make a profit, someone that's trying to turn this from a hobby into something that can be profitable. But now we're going to adjust into the max entry player and then the deep dive into the contest breakdown. It's going to be a good thing for you guys to hear. Let's go. There are 2 ways to be a profitable player. There is the cash only approach, which is much safer and the approach that normal people should be going with. A lot of people don't have the proper budget or proper allocation of funds to be able to do this secondary approach. Okay, it's much more risky and you're going to lose a ton. Okay, this is the GPP only approach, and I want to specifically point that out. This is for the people that are 150 max entering into contests. They're making 150 lineups and max entering. This can be a profitable approach, okay? But just know, with this approach, you're really focused on hitting a lineup maybe once a month with the big upside, maybe winning a contest once out of every 3 months, okay? It's a very risky approach, but I think just like in cash, where your sole focus should be on making a main build, if you're this player that's doing 150 lineups, you should only be focusing on entering 150 lineups. That way you can kind of make some proper ownership decisions, lineup decisions, maybe some tee time advantages decisions. You're focusing all your energy on that, and that's going to be the specific lineup approach that you would want to go with. A common theme that I see with people is that they're trying to do too much of both. They're playing cash, they have a main build going, then they are also trying to 150 max enter or $75 lineups or whatever. You need to pick and choose what you want to do. Either you're going to be the profit player or you're going to be the high risk, high reward type player. Choose your spot, give it a good 3 months to try it out, maybe a month to try it out. If it's not working, adjust your plans and move on. What they can do is really just focus on making optimal GPP builds, factoring in lower ownership players at the end of their build. Okay, and I'll show that later on in terms of contest selection, in terms of players that enter high dollar amounts that do that. But if you do this and you're focusing on making optimal builds, but also focusing on, capturing upside, you're going to have, pretty solid weeks throughout. But obviously you're focusing on having that high upside week. These players are going to have some weeks in which they might not profit for 2 weeks straight. Then they'll have a stretch where they profit for 3 weeks straight. They know that this is going to be high risk and high reward, but still the focus should be on making optimal player pool and optimal lineups, just factoring a little bit more risk at the end of their lineups. But now let's get into contest selection, because that to me is a big distinction that a lot of people need to be able to look and see what is needed when entering contests. So we're going to look at the 2 most popular contests that the average player will enter. That's going to be the Millie Maker and then that $1 contest that has the most entries available. And then we're going to get into what are going to be 2 contests that you guys can enter to help yourself be able to make a profit. So looking at the Millie Maker, it is going to be a $20 contest this week. 21.8% of the field are actually going to cash, okay, which actually is not a bad number for GPP contest. That's actually very good, but only 10% of that contest is going to be able to double up. And if you're just trying to make $100, you would have to finish in the top 0.1% just to make $100. So over 99.9% of people are not going to make any noteworthy money in that tournament. All right, so now we're going to look at that $1 contest. So in terms of players cashing in that contest, 27% of the field is actually going to be able to cash, which, really not a bad number there once again. But in terms of players that are going to be able to double up, only 12% of the field are going to be able to double up. If we're looking at that same profit margin for the Millie Maker, you'd have to finish in the top 0.9% of that contest to have that same profit margin. And I'm kind of pointing that distinction out because, well, that's not a bad number compared to the Millie Maker that was 0.1%. If you were to enter 20 lineups of the dollar contest instead of 1 lineup into the Millie Maker, and you cash at that same profit margin, you'd be making $120 just with that dollar contest, as opposed to you would that Millie Maker contest where you'd only be making $100. Okay, much better, payout there, and you have a much more likelihood of being able to cash in that contest. Like I said, guys, 12% of the field are able to double up at least in that dollar contest, and 27% of the field are going to be able to cash, whereas the Millie Maker, 21.8% of the field are just cashing, and 10% of the field are going to be able to double up. So in terms of like a better contest enter, if you're one person that does have that average per month, $51, you know, that's going to be the much better optimal approach to go with. But if you're someone that, you know, is looking for a much better contest to enter, we're going to be looking at that $12 single entry contest. Okay, it's a GPP contest that typically has a great payout structure. If we're looking at this week for the PGA Championship, we can see that 20% of the field is going to make $25. So 20% of the field is going to more than double up in that contest. If we're looking at that same profit margin for the Millie Maker, it's going to be the same as that $1 contest. So to hit that same profit margin of the Millie Maker, all you'd have to do in the $12 contest is finish in the top 0.9%. Now let's say if you wanted to enter to win $100 for that contest, well then you just have to finish in the top 0.7% of that contest, which still is much better than that Millie Maker, in which you would have to finish in the top 0.1%. So once again, we can see by example that the $12 single entry contest is going to be the best contest for you if you're just someone that does, you know, a slight amount of lineups each week. I do want to point out a personal example of mine, which was the Showdown contest that I entered recently. I had a top 10 finish. It was a $15 entry. I won $500. The top payout was $25,000. Okay, so for my finish, I finished in the top 0.1%, which was great. I won 2% of that winning amount, which actually I won 0.85% of the total payout. So I actually ended up winning 0.85% of the total amount entered. So I had a top 0.1% finish, but I only won 0.85% of the total amount entered. Let that set in. You know, that's not that good. It's a great finish. Felt great to get a top 10 finish. But in actuality, I didn't really win that much. And that's kind of the nature of the beast. And that's why we're going to look at the double up contest, which is actually going to be the best contest for you. So we're just looking at the single entry double up contest. We can see 43% are going to cash in single entry double up contest, which is a great number. That is the approach that we should be focusing on right now if you're just trying to make a profit. That pretty much sums up how you can become just a better player in DFS, but also specifically in PGA DFS. Focus on your lineup construction mostly, and then also you got to remember that contest selection does matter as well. You combine those two and you're going to have much better weeks, but you got to remember it is a season-long thing that you're trying to do. Okay, I know it is a daily thing, but specifically the nice thing about like NFL DFS and PGA DFS is that there are two sports that you really can play for the full season of that sport. I hope this was a good learning experience for everyone. I hope this is going to help everyone become a better PGA DFS player, or just a solid reminder for those people that are good PGA DFS players that maybe lost track of some of these tips and tricks that I went over in this video. All in all, I'm just trying to help you guys out. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it's going to help you guys become a better player. If not, remind you some quick tips and tricks. All right, thanks guys.